Berurah. We are in Orach Chaim Kuf Nun Aleph. We are in Orach Chaim 151, continuing in our journey through the laws of the basic Knesset. What is the requirements for building it, maintaining it? Today we're talking a little bit about the maintenance. So last week we learned about building it. How tall it has to be, where the seats have to go, where the entrances go. And now we're going to talk about the sanctity of it. Okay, the conduct and the way in which things are done in the shul is directly connected to its kedusha, to its sanctity. So just a couple of words to kind of get us going over here. The word kedusha is going to refer to the proper treatment of the base knesses, meaning there's a certain amount of conduct rules that create an atmosphere of sanctity, and we'll refer to that as kedusha. And the basic knesses is going to be the place where people come just to daven. We're also going to talk a little bit about the base medrash, which is where people come to learn. The rules are a little bit different because you kind of spend more time in a base medrash than you do in a basic knesses. Basic knesses, you come, you daven, you leave. So there's what to say about that. Sometimes some places have multiple uses, but that's where we're going to look into this a little bit. So we're going to start off with the first halacha here in 151, Kuf Nun Aleph, in the laws of the sanctity of the basic knesset. Says shuls, bati knesios, and bati midrashes. Shuls and schools. All right, places where people learn, or yeshivas. A yeshiva has a din of a base medrash. You are not allowed to conduct yourself frivolously. The term in Hebrew is called kalos rosh, for the lightheadedness, which some examples are laughing, playing, talking about non-important things. It's called sicha b'tela, or worthless things, and you don't eat and drink in them. Okay, you also aren't allowed to put your makeup on there, so don't do that. Don't put your makeup on in the shul. Okay, and you also cannot just take a stroll through there, meaning you can't just use it to pass through. And you also can't hide from the sun when it's a sunny day, and hide from the rain because it's raining. The Talmidei Chachamim and their students, meaning rebbes and their students, are permitted to eat and drink if they need to have some place to do that. Okay? So the Ramah says that in a base medrash, even without any type of real serious need, it's permitted. Right? So if you come to our base medrash, everyone has something to drink. You probably eat something too, but it's hard to eat. It's easy to learn and drink. It's not so easy to learn and eat. You also aren't allowed to do bookkeeping. Okay, they're called cheshbonos. You're not allowed to go ahead and do your bookkeeping there, unless you're doing a mitzvah for the bookkeeping, like it's for the shul itself, or you're taking, for example, you're keeping books for the charity, how much charity is coming in, how much charity is going out, and how much money you need to rescue somebody who's been captured by non-Jews. It's a mitzvah. And you also aren't allowed to do eulogies there, unless the eulogy is someone who's very important to the city. Because everyone in the shul, in the city, gathers in the shul, and they're going to come to listen. So you might as well have it in the shul, but a regular person shouldn't do that. Now, if you need to go in shul, and you have some personal matter to which you must attend to, for example, you're going to ask somebody to come in, okay? And you're also going to sit and learn a little bit, okay? Or you're telling somebody that you heard something and you're going to call him to come with you. You don't want to do things that make it look like you're going in there for your own purposes. You need to go ahead and make it look like you're coming in to do some type of praying or learning. And if he doesn't know how to learn something and no one's teaching anything, then you should ask one of the children, recite for me a verse you've learned today that you can recite for me. Okay? Or he should wait inside the shul and sit down, and then he can go ahead and get up, because sitting in shul is also a mitzvah. Why? Because we say every day, multiple times a day, Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha. Praiseworthy are those who dwell in your house. And actually, we're taking it literally as praiseworthy are those who just simply sit in your house. The Ramah adds, the amount of time you have to sit in the shul is the amount of time it would take you to walk to 2 doors. Okay? So that is the end of that halacha. Now, let's go over what some of these types of conduct are. So the Mishnah Berurah says, what is kalos rosh? So he doesn't actually answer that question. He just uses that as the place to jump off. We're talking about the sanctity of the synagogue. He says, this is called a mikdash ma'at. A shul is a tiny temple. Okay, just like the temple that was in Jerusalem, the base of Mikdash, this is the Mikdash Ma'at, the tiny temple. Okay, and it says, because we see in the verse that refers to other shuls as being small temples. The Midrash says the following: you shall be fearful of my holy places. So one should have the same deal of awe and respect for the one who dwells upon these things as you do for the actual building itself. Okay? And the Smach, the Sefer Mitzvos Katan, says that the sin of being frivolous inside of the synagogue is what turns it into a church, a base of Avodah Zarah. So that's, if you want to know why a shul was destroyed and a house dedicated to idol worship was replaced there, it's because people didn't take the shul seriously. The Shulchan Aruch says not to also have frivolous conversations. Mishra says those are standard secular conversations, right? Like things that pertain to business, okay? That you can say outside of shul, okay? But in shul, no, don't do that. Especially if it's really silly things, right? Of course, you shouldn't talk about them. Like talking about pop culture nonsense. Just get that out of your mouth. Get that out of the shul. You should stay away from that. He quotes the Pri Megadim. The Zohar says the following about how tremendously bad the sin is for saying things in the shul that are absolutely frivolous. Especially, too, you can work careful in a shul and a beis medrash from speaking things that are prohibited to say, like lashon hara, or tail bearing, like rechilas, or picking fights or fighting with other people. Because not only are these things bad on their own, it's even worse in a holy place to pick the fight. Okay, because now what you're doing is you are depreciating the value due to God's presence in that place. So the one person who does something wrong on their own, like they did at home, away from everybody else, is not the same as somebody who acts out publicly, especially before the King of Kings. And the gravity of the evil that you've created is going to convince people that somehow other types of bad sins are socially acceptable to do. So you're setting a bad example, and and in a sense, this one bad action becomes a flood of bad actions. And at first, it starts out with like a few people, and then it becomes everybody gets together and they're making groups, and they fight. The groups fight amongst each other. They instigation against each other until the whole shul is just a giant bonfire of the vanities. He doesn't say the vanities, but he calls it a giant bonfire. But in our common parlance, it would be a bonfire of the vanities. People picking the fight to basically profess their own ego. And with our great many sins, Zakta Mishnah Berurah, we've seen this so many times that things have come to absolute fierce disputes, and people have acted blasphemously, and they humiliate each other publicly, and sometimes they even do it in front of the Sefer Torah. This is even worse, especially when it's done in other times, because someone who humiliates his friend in front of a Talmid Chacham, So the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, in the last chapter of Sanhedrin, or the last chapter that we read in Sanhedrin, chapter Chelek, that a person who humiliates somebody else in front of a Talmud Chacham is included in the definition of an apikoros, and such a person loses their status in Olam Haba, and so too someone who humiliates his friend in front of the Sefer Torah, and there's more dignity is owed to God's presence in that place than what you've been providing. And this is actually explicitly stated in the Chuvas of the Mahari the Mahari Weil, okay, Ashkenazi posek from the 15th century. And people will start to punch each other and humiliate each other and increase the profanity of God, the profanation of God's name amongst the nations. And what would have caused all this were not for starting off with some little tiny thing that was for sure not such a big deal, and for sure had you prevented it, you could have received a significant amount of reward for having just resolved it. Okay, so therefore, a person who is fearful and is concerned about such things, and he's worried about what God says, he will constantly take this counsel to heart and have it before him at all times, and he will feel within him a rather important sense of not engaging in nonsensical things in shul and in the Beis Medrash, and then those are places should be left only for Torah and Tefillah, right? Learning and davening. Okay, the Mishna continues. You also are not allowed to eat there. Okay, and so too, you can't do any type of work there. So you can't sit there and build boxes, okay, or something like that, or put together puzzles. You also can't use it to hide from the sun. The Mishna says, and it doesn't matter that you're going and sitting and learning, okay, or teaching something to somebody else, because you're only trying to get in there to get out of the sun. You can go to any other building to get out of the heat. So going there to get out of the heat would be inappropriate. Okay? So if you're going in there, it has to be only to learn and not to get out of the heat or the rain. And you could have stayed out of the shul itself and still taught yourself that one halacha or read that one verse. Okay? Now, and so too, furthermore, if the rain starts pouring down, you can walk into the Beis Medrash in order to learn, because you don't want to be caught out in the rain. That would be an exception. So if you were standing outside and it started and you were learning something outside, and then it starts to rain, then you want to go inside and continue learning, that would be permitted. Okay, so Ramah brings down that it's permitted to do eating and drinking. And furthermore, it's also allowed to feed visitors who are poor. Can be fed in the shul and in the Beis Medrash, and you can also allow them to spend the night there. It's also permitted, but this is only in the shuls that are outside the land of Israel. And some people prohibit this even outside of the land of Israel. But if you have a real need to put somebody somewhere and it's the only place you have to stay in town, there's no reason to be picky about it. Okay, and so the Ramah says that you can eat and drink. Further, and the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah adds that sleeping is also permitted, but you can't, use it to pass through, make a shortcut in the city. And you also can't hide from the sun in there, and hide from the rain. Excuse me. And all these things are mentioned. That I mentioned later on, along with those things I mentioned earlier about the silliness and the playing and all those things, are also prohibited, because even a Talmud Chacham who's sitting and learning all day has to be careful of what's going on inside the shul and how he behaves himself inside the shul. Okay, and again, we say that you're permitted to eat and drink out of need. So there's a little tiny spot, is what he means, to feed the students and they have to eat there. And the Magen Avraham says that for people who are sitting and learning all the time, then that's considered shas d'chak for them. So even according to the Mechaber, that they can sit and eat, because having to get up and go walk home or go get a drink at some other place is a real tircha, right? It's an extra step. That's an unreasonable or unnecessary step, and they're going to lose time that they just sat and been learning. And so therefore, in those cases, even the Shulchan Aruch would agree that you can go ahead and be eating there. But if you're not learning in the shul or in the Beis Medrash, then you're not allowed to eat or drink there at all, according to the Mechaber, and that's what Achronim all agree to. Okay, so what does the Ramah disagree with? So Mr. Berurah explains that even though the holiness of Beis Medrash is more so than a Knesses, more so than a shul, and we'll learn about that in Kuf and Gimel. Okay, what the opinion is saying is that when it comes to teachers and their students, right, the Talmid Chachamim and the Talmidim, since they're learning there all day, they permitted for them to go ahead and eat there to save on time and the pressure of having to go somewhere else. Okay, because it really should feel like the Beis Medrash place of learning is your home, and it's not just eating and drinking, and you can also do other things there too, like you could literally live there. And Mishna Berurah then brings us, look at the Lavush and the Bach, that the main halacha is like the Ramah, okay? And there's no reason to be strict about people who learn there nowadays, even if it's not a full-fledged, they're not learning there full-fledged all the time, not on the team of the Talmid Chacham. You can still go ahead and take special usage of the Beis Medrash, okay? And we said that one of the things you shouldn't do is give a eulogy there, unless it's somebody who's really important in the city. And Mishna Berurah explains, because the person who has passed away, the relatives of that person who passed away are going to want to use the shul, okay? And that's why some people are going to come. And furthermore, that the hesped, if it's for a really big scholar, a big Talmid Chacham, you should also have it in the shul. The Ari from the Zohar used to be careful not to speak in shul except about tefillah, and even if it's something that was musar or something else, because he doesn't want to try to talk about something else that might not be relevant to Torah, and so therefore he wouldn't talk about them in shul at all. Let's see. The next word over here, it says next one is Aleph. What's going on? All right, so you have to, when you're pausing in the shul, you shouldn't go into the shul for your business. You have to learn something or hear something. And so if you have to repeat something that's a davar shmua, which is something that you have learned from somebody else, which would be either a halacha or a mishnah. Okay, and then you can go ahead and summon the person you are trying to find, which the Mishna Berurah explains is that you shouldn't meet him first without reciting the thing that you have to hear. Okay, because the people should only hear you saying divrei Torah, and then the length amount of time you have to sit there is the amount of time to walk from one side to the other, which is that you should wait there long enough to walk from one door to the other door. Okay, which is 8 tefachim. Okay, that's like 2 amos. That is the first halacha. It took us a long time. Okay, the second halacha here, there are those who say that when we say about the holiness of the Bate Midrashos, that's if they are public Bate Midrashos, like the public library, right? Because then they act like a basic Knesset. However, a single person who is looking to establish his own shul, okay, or he's trying to establish some Beis Medrash in his home, it has none of these kedusha rules apply to it. So the Mishna Berurah says, what does it mean to build it for his own purposes? If it's not built on the condition of making it sanctified like a public like a public base medrash, there's no kedusha attached to it. It's just like this is a room to learn. And what that means is, since we've set it up to be a public place, even if people aren't davening there at all, it still has the holiness of a base medrash. And look later on in Simkuf and Gimel, if a shul is the same thing as that. Okay, so I don't know what it says in Kuf and Gimel, so let me look up here 1 second. Kuf and Gimel. So let's see over here. What is it saying? Kuf and Gimel. Okay, let's see. If you build a house and you want to set it up to be a shul, and then it becomes a shul. But if you don't set it up to be that way, even if you're davening there, it doesn't have the sanctity of a base knesses. Okay? And even if visitors come in and daven there, because it's not meant to be only set aside for prayer. And if it's only meant to be temporary use for that, that doesn't apply to it. Okay, so that's what we're saying in our case as well, is that if you didn't set it up to be a regular shul, then it doesn't become, just because you start using it like a shul doesn't mean it becomes a shul. Okay. Let's look at the next halacha over here. Halacha Gimel. One is not allowed to sleep in shul, even a temporary, like a quick nap. But in a base medrash, that's okay. The Mishnah Berurah explains that they're talking about regular people, but the Talmud Chacham and his Talmidim who are learning there, we already said that's fine. Okay, we landed it up above in Sifkat and Vav. All right, so why is the base medrash permitted for sleeping? Meaning that you can do a little nap. Okay, and if you look at Rabbi Akiva Eger, he says he doesn't like it. Okay, and the reason why is because the base medrash, it's like it's meant for you to stay there, but not to just go find a long time to go take a nap. The reason why you're there is to spend a lot of time there learning, and to hear Divrei Torah, right? And it's hard to not take a little nap, but to go in there for the purpose of taking a little nap, So he's not saying that's prohibited. It's just that you should go in there to take a nap. And for a Talmud Chacham who's learning there regularly, you could take a nap, even if it's a long nap. It's called Shinas Keva. Okay, let's see. I'm going to hold it there. I think so. Yeah, because I think, 4 is not that long. I think let's hold it. There. We'll do 1, 2, and 3. 1 was very long and involved. We'll pick up this because there's 12 sifim in here. I don't want to not have enough for next class. So I'll hold it here. So we started to learn a little bit about what's important for having a shul and for having a base medrash, and this should be meant for people to go there and be somewhat presentable and be somewhat, aware of who it's serving. And we see that if it's a public place, that it should have some kedusha. If it's a private place, it doesn't have any kedusha. Okay, and we say that there are permitted things in there, like things that you could do that keep you strong, keep you learning. But for regular, everyday needs like business and so on, those aren't considered real needs for the shul. But you could go in to get somebody, have them come out and say, "I need to talk to you." All right, so thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next time when we'll learn more about the basic knesses and about eating and sleeping there. Okay, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining.